Welcome to the Driving Change podcast on the Evergreen Podcast Network, where we live at the intersection of neuroscience and storytelling. If you love great stories and you love understanding the mindset it takes to be a world-class change agent, then join us as our fascinating guests from all walks of life unpack their unique journeys of perseverance and passion, of expertise and experience, and be inspired to use your own story to drive change. Well, welcome back to the Driving Change podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Jeff Bloomfield. Have you ever had this desire? I mean, we watch a lot of movies and films and TV shows, and I think all of us have always channeled our inner actor or actress and thought to ourselves, man, I could do that. That'd be fun. I would love to be on a show. And some of you might have hives just thinking about what it would be like to have to be under the pressure of being an actor or actress. But haven't you ever wondered what it would feel like to hear that, congratulations, you got the part? Well, today, Lauren Lane is our guest, and you're going to love her backstory. You might recognize the name. She's an American actress and also the head of acting now at Texas State University. You might recognize her from her 10 years in Los Angeles and Hollywood, where she starred in 3 award-winning TV series that I'm sure you'll recognize, especially if you're Gen X or older. Maybe you Gen Zs and millennials out there might be watching them in syndication. But The Nanny, LA Law, Hunter, just to name a couple of shows that she was an award-winning actress in. Her performances earned her numerous awards, including the LA Critics Award, the Austin Critics Circle Award, and multiple B. Iden Payne Awards. Now, that didn't stop her because she became a great teacher of the art and skill of acting. And then she went back, and we're going to hear her story in a little bit, but now as the professor, and she actually leads the School of Head of Acting at Texas State. She's also one of my favorite actors, Tim Robbins' award-winning theater company, a proud member of his Actors Gang, which I'm sure there's a lot of great stories in there. And so she's just been a pro in all of this. So we're going to learn her story and learn what she's learned from her story in her life's journey. So Lauren, thank you so much for being on the Driving Change podcast. We're honored to have you.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm really happy to be here. I'm really interested in the work that you do. And I think as you spoke, I thought, I've used that both in acting work and certainly in teaching and my academic work. So I'm very interested in this. I think it's a terrific thing to teach people. So compelled.
Well, this will be fun. This will be fun because there's so much that goes into the mindset and the mental, right? The mental side of acting and teaching that applies in all the communication we teach. And I think your story is going to really pull a lot of that out in a different way. But as you know, if you've listened to the show, and I gave you the forewarning in the pre-show, is the very first thing is our audience that doesn't know you, and they only know you probably as an actress. We want to know you, Laura. We want to really know you. So take us back to that little Texas girl growing up, and tell us your origin story, and then who were the people in your life that influenced you, and how in the world you got from Texas to Hollywood and back to Texas. Tell us that whole story.
Okay, happy to. Well, it all starts. I'm a red dirt girl, which I don't know if you know that phrase, but that means I'm from Oklahoma, which is where I was born.
I'm a redneck guy, so that's different, I guess.
I'm
from Kentucky originally. So.
Plenty, and love them in lots and lots of ways. I was born in Oklahoma City. I was raised around farms. I did not grow up on a farm, but my grandparents, my great-grandparents had a farm. My aunts and uncles had farms. And the way I just said aunt is absolutely not the way that I would have said it as a child. It would have been Aunt Chloe, Aunt Dee. So that's I have no judgment either way. One of my first memories, actually, I think I was 3.5 or 4, at my great-grandparents' farm in Pauls Valley, Oklahoma. Some folks may know that. Was sitting in a root cellar because there was a tornado. If you live in Oklahoma, you get it. I probably lived through, and also I lived in West Texas for a long time. So I've been through minimum 15 tornadoes. And by that, I mean touching the ground, not far away, or watching them from the roof of our house.
Oh, you're one of those people.
So I have a relationship with tornadoes, both like fear and deep respect, and they actually are quite beautiful. So I'm a little bit of a rabbit holes online. I'll go on YouTube to watch the chasers. I'm obsessed with those people. So that's one of my very first memories. The fact that I'm the first college graduate. I'm the first graduate school, the first person to get an MFA in my entire family. So I come from folks who are not conventionally educated, but have loads and loads of wisdom and practical experience. And that's what I was raised on. If work needs to be done, work gets done. There's loads and loads of story about origin, about day to day, about absurdity. The women in my family, particularly, great storytellers, really great. And and I have a 26-year-old daughter who has grown up to also become that. She's not an actor, and she's not in the arts, but it's interesting to see. It feels almost genetic. From the South, or I guess I'm not sure exactly about. It's certainly not the deep South, but the South. So I lived in Oklahoma with those folks until my immediate family, moved to Lubbock, Texas, because of my dad's job. My dad was the GM of a number of different General Tire stores. So I grew up sort of with an entirely different, deep respect and almost reverence for, what some people would consider a very sort of blue collar life, and I suppose it was, but it felt like there's a hydraulic lift there that I can ride in the mechanics bay. And there are rolling chairs, like office chairs, the speed that you can get up to, all of that fun. And there was a lot of joy along with whatever challenges, just like everybody we face. So Lubbock, we lived there until my father was offered a very fancy General Tire position in Dallas, Texas. So from like fifth grade, so about 12 through college, through my undergraduate work, I lived in Arlington, Texas, which is smack dab between Dallas and Fort Worth. So it's where the Rangers. It's very different now than when I was there. But the end of my elementary school, we called it junior high. I think it's called middle school now, and straight through high school, I lived in Texas, in Arlington. So lots of always the South, always some, like I said, early years, agrarian, agriculture, farms, farm people, farm equipment, cattle, all the way through a life where I was surrounded by people that had no connection with that. And so it's an interesting spectrum. Make sense? Excuse me. And I can talk about after that, or how I got into or interested in.
Yeah, let's break it up in chapters here. So that the early part of your life, from growing up in Oklahoma as a young child on to Texas, and before you went off to college, what would you say maybe the top 3 to 5? Because we know this through not only neuroscience research, but just through actual the human element, that our values are instilled and kind of installed in our firmware at a very young age, due to our experiences and where we come from, and our parents and grandparents, a lot of those. And what are some of maybe the top 3 to 5 values that you find were universal for you, that you learned at such a young age, and we'll say young, from Oklahoma all the way through college, that we'll get into the Hollywood piece, but that you found you took with you, maybe didn't even realize they were in there. You knew they were part of who you were, they were core, but you started to see them kind of evolve. And where did those, what were those values, and where would you say maybe they came from the most?
You know what I'm interested in, Jeff, is I don't know exactly how you might in your business you might characterize this, but there's a side that I think most people would consider very positive, very maybe very American, core American values. And then there's a side that's very individual to me. It may not sound as positive, but I think it's interesting to talk about both, if that's okay.
Sure.
The positives, because I do come from working class folk, and not conventionally educated people, there was a respect for carrying your own weight, for understanding and not complaining. Things need to be done. Everybody's working hard. And for someone to draw attention to their own, even just themselves, not in the sense of like if you're injured or et cetera, but if you're just complaining, there was no tolerance for that. So I learned that really young, which I think is sort of like a hard work ethic. It doesn't scare me, and I think I've embraced that my whole life. So I feel lucky. I think a strong sense of male and female, gender specific roles, work, even though it sounds so old fashioned and so sort of almost, what's the word? Like founding fathers, or like so far back, like women's work is this and men's work is that. But I'm going to tell you, I come from a family where at Thanksgiving, the women did all of the cooking, all of the work, and the men ate first. Literally, like that, we stood back and waited and ate, filled our plates and ate after they ate, which I think a lot of people would be, contemporary Americans might find that very unusual. That's what I grew up with. So femininity, but also feminine strength, the narrative of the women was really interesting. I paid attention to a lot of that. A third tenet that I might have grown up with, I think the third that I'm going to name may also then reflect into the sides of me that were very specific to me, unique. My own value as a person, as a member of the family, I understood that I had value and that I was, my contribution counted. So that can be wonderful, especially when you're looking for self-esteem or validation within whatever way your family works. The flip side of that for me was, and this is how I'm wired, and probably why I did the things that I did, a lot of it did not feel like clothes that fit me. A lot of the gender-specific work, the ideas about who speaks and who listens, watching women sort of understand that if they need something or if they're going to get something, directly asking for it is not always, in fact, rarely, how you're going to get what you need. So I watched all of that, and I was born with a rebellious spirit. So I called it out. I questioned a lot. I was troublesome. I think that, and we're talking young, 12, before teen years. So that's what my parents got sort of stuck with, was a young girl who didn't understand why, air quotes, whatever the beliefs are of your audience. Like, why does God seem to value women less? Why does society seem to not care if I want something or want to do something? Why does my immediate family tell me to, shh, we don't, that's too much, stop. So I had those opposing forces for a long time. Well, still, really. Um, so I don't want to go on and on. You let me know if there's.
No, I think it's good because I think what I love to what I love to do in the show and just in general is everyone's story matters, right? And when we seek to understand and find universal beliefs that we can, I think that's the problem in the world today, in my opinion, is we just look immediately for things that are oppositional in people so that we can almost tell them why they're wrong and I'm right. And I think if we could flip back to, hey, what were the commonalities of your life experiences that line up with some of the commonalities in my life's experiences, and what could we do together if we leaned into the gifts of what we believe that's universal? And what I heard you say was we grew up very similarly. I grew up on a farm in Ohio, and I grew up that you can make progress or you can make excuses, but you can't make both. I grew up, just right, learning all of this stuff, but also having a little bit of a challenger mentality where I'm like, I don't know that I want to run the farm. I don't know if I want to be blue collar my whole life, and yet, but I was encouraged at the same time that I didn't have to be. So I
Mhm,
could, if I wanted to go
mhm,
on to college, I should go to college. I should do something
mhm.
different. So I guess my point is that I'm always curious about where my story and experiences might align with someone else's story and experiences, even if out of 20 beliefs that you and I might have, we might disagree on 6 of them, but I bet we agree on 14 of them. And if we could have a relationship on 14 things, wouldn't the world be better off than if we tried to fight each other on the 6?
Absolutely.
You,
I, I, I
you know what
love
I mean?
that.
So
I do know what you mean. I heard a story this morning. I was listening to just a terrific lecture and online, and I feel bad because I cannot think of the author. He's quite famous. Um, was saying when he and his brother were discussing their father's health care, they disagreed about a lot of actions, but they did know that in the center of that, they wanted the best for their father's health, the best. And so if they kept that at the heart of the conversation, even while they were discussing hard things, it was easier to see one another, seeing one another. That's really deep seeing, is what I'm, over the course of my years, I've started to understand is at the center of what makes us human.
so true. And we all bring with us, on this journey, like I call it, junk in our brain trunk, right? We all pack a bunch of junk in our brain trunk, and sometimes it leaks out, and we don't if we don't really take the time to understand someone else's story and let them be vulnerable with them, then we really don't have the core essence of human relationship. So what I'm curious about now is, because this is starting to, I'm piecing this together now. This is making a lot of sense to me. So, because acting in some ways is such a powerful way to move someone with a character and character development to see something and discover something about themselves that if I just told you this, you might not have received. But if you experience it, you absorb it right into a different way. So what was your passion about saying, you know what, besides the fact that you had a little bit of a wild streak and hey, I might as well leave Texas and go to Hollywood, besides the fact that you were a tornado chaser, and why not take that tornado spirit all the way to LA? Like, when was that moment where you're like, I'm going to go be an actress, and that's what I'm going to do?
Um, I'm going to take you back to middle school, junior high. So I was about 13 or 14. And you know how they used to do announcements? I don't know, maybe they still do. But when I was in school, announcements over the speaker in the classrooms, I heard this congratulations to what they call the speech team, who had just won XYZ at some contest. I had no idea what they were talking about. And in that moment, I said, or a voice, whatever, said to me, I'm going to win that next year. I didn't know what it was. So it was one of those sort of magical moments where um, everyone can just take from that what they will. It was a voice, and it told me that, and I did. I learned. So I started with what in Texas we call forensics, which is sort of debate and speech, learning how to give speeches, optimists club sort of speeches, and prose and poetry performing. And I joined, it was both an individual team, it was a team sport, but also individual efforts. So I did really, really well at that. That's where I come from. I didn't act until my senior year of high school. I was in one play, and I played Mrs. Gibbs in Our Town, for those people who know it. So I played like a middle to old age woman who sits on a porch and sort of breaks the ends off beams and talks. So
But you killed it, I bet you.
I can play it today, no problem. I have the life behind me now as a 17-year-old. So I come from analysis, from if I'm debating, it's all based in facts and presenting point of view. I'm going to just stick with that. So that's where I started. So I hit university, and I went to community college in Arlington. Don't come from wealth. My parents couldn't put me through college. So I, started working and putting myself through school, which I always talk to my students about, because I come often from worlds that they're from. So I had both. It's not like I knew the end of that road. I was just on a road where I was being very practical because I had to, but also learning who I was in the work that was available to me. So starting with debate, forensics, et cetera. In undergrad, I declared journalism and communications. So in my head, I'm thinking, acting is fancy and it's not something that I can allow myself to do because it's not practical. So I'll become like a television journalist or something. But I kept sort of being drawn to the theater space on campus. And finally, I just changed my major. And I was in loads and loads of plays, and apologies for that notification sound. I was in loads and loads of plays, and I started to understand myself in the work, because there's teaching. I teach undergrads, and there is, how to put this? I'll talk about myself. Understanding storytelling, understanding the respect of the narrative of a character in a story, a play, a novel, is one thing. Fame, getting attention, longing for praise is a very different thing. And they're both combined in this art form in a very strange way. Now, you have to remember, the internet didn't exist. Cell phones, nothing existed that I saw every day, images coming at me about a celebrity, and celebrity being the goal. But I certainly saw films and television. So it's hard for me now, looking back, to understand completely. Like, I love reading, storytelling, sort of, I probably could be a forensic detective, in another life. I love that kind of questioning. But also, who doesn't love attention? So who knows exactly how much of each was at play? But I got through my undergraduate degree. I was a 5-year senior. My father died while I was in school of a long illness, but he died quite young. So I went through life, big life, while I was an undergraduate. So I certainly bring that in my role as a professor. I have a lot of empathy, but I also understand if things take you down, they take you down. And reaching out for help, support, understanding who your structure is something very valuable to learn when you're young. It's not easy, but it's valuable. So that's me getting through undergrad.
So what was the trigger? What was the trigger then to get you to LA? Like, when did that happen?
So we have 3 more years before that happens, because when I finished undergraduate, Meryl Streep was just becoming famous, and Robin Williams, Sigourney Weaver, they were all in their early careers. when I finished undergraduate. And they had all gone to something called graduate school. I didn't know anything about this, but I respected deeply all of those artists that I just named. So I did research, and I thought many of them went to Yale School of Drama, and some of them went to Juilliard, and some of them went to a school in San Francisco called the American Conservatory Theater. So I auditioned. I had to pay. It's expensive to. I don't know if you went to grad school, but it's expensive to just apply, and then if you're an actor, you have to go audition. So I could only afford two, Yale and ACT in San Francisco. I'm gonna have a little sip real quick. I didn't get into Yale, but I did get into ACT, San Francisco. So I went from Arlington, Texas, never having ridden a city bus, commuting everywhere. Texas is big, and you drive and drive and drive to a very small city, very full of a liberality and a self-expression that I had never experienced. So it was probably, if I were to name most influential times of my life, those 3 years would be defining. So I spent 3 years in San Francisco getting my master's at a school that was prestigious enough that when we graduated, we did a big showcase in both New York and Los Angeles, to which loads of agents and managers and so forth came. We're talking 1989 now. That's when I graduated. And immediately I had a number of agents in both LA and New York who were ready to sign me, which was, that's the gatekeeper. It's less so now because of the proliferation of platforms. The gatekeepers are powerful in different ways, but not the same way. You couldn't do anything if you didn't have a good agent. And I knew I don't have funds. I was living on borrowed money, a lot of borrowed money. So I knew I can sustain myself for a while, but then I'll have to get a full-time day job. And that just means it's going to take longer. I was going to probably be in line longer. So I had to make the decision, do I go to Los Angeles or do I go to New York? And New York sort of represented many of the actors that I most respected, sort of theater. They went theater into movies or television. Los Angeles was just a different beast, but I also knew in LA is where you make money. And I needed, I had 65 grand this is 1989, in student loans to be an actor. So, and I'm practical enough to know that is crazy. I just sort of had to be blind faith. So of all of my classmates, there were 10 of us who made it through the final year. I was the only one that went to Los Angeles, and all the rest went to New York. And this is important to understand. This is 1990. I was 30. So that means, I was 30, which in LA time is you're middle-aged.
Right.
Especially at this time in history. And I knew in my heart, I've got 10 years until I'm too old, in LA at least. And my friend, 6 weeks after I landed, I had the lead on a detective show, and I didn't stop working until I was 41.
So you had a good agent, obviously, and a big sense of urgency.
Exactly. Stakes were high, and I was good. And I think this is my background. I wasn't afraid of thinking strategically and creating a trajectory. And I think the other parts of my life really helped me to sit in a room with someone like you, but you could hire me and I could be myself in a way that they could feel.
Right. That's what you're kind of getting into what I was going to ask then. So in that 11-year period, then what were the one or two, maybe three things that you really learned about yourself? And on that journey where you either confirmed something you already knew about yourself, but it wasn't until you demonstrated it in that setting that you knew it was real, or was it something that you discovered about yourself in that 10, 11-year period that maybe surprised you or that really kind of brought a new sense of purpose to who you were?
I learned that the type of storytelling that I was in love with at that moment in my life was allowed to very few people, artists. And by allowed, I mean there are just very, very few opportunities. It's a business. And so, in order to tell those kinds of stories, anything transformational, you have to carry a film on your back, and that's millions and millions of dollars. And so, you need to be a proven commodity. So, learning business, I didn't, unlike what we do at Texas State, I received zero business classes, zero professional preparation, nor did I receive any acting for the camera. Zero. It was all classical theater training. So I was learning on the job, terrified. I learned I can learn really quickly. I can fake it until I make it. That's a strength, but the darker side of that, the shadow side of that, is hiding oneself, being afraid to be vulnerable, is eventually an impediment in life, and an impediment certainly as an artist, because being vulnerable, being open to change, being open to being said, no, you're not right, not feeling defensive, not feeling protected, is crucial and hard. So hard.
Isn't that so? And we talk about that around here every day, right? That self-preservation orientation we all have, and the fear of if we're vulnerable. And here I am, and here you are in Hollywood now, and you're already kind of second guessing. Do I have the skills to be behind a camera when I've been classically trained? And so if I tell people I don't know something or I have questioned something, is that going to be the cue that they need to lop my head off and move me on? And so
Oh, the stakes
your
are
brain's
high.
telling you all these stories, right? Because then you can justify it with, well, there's 5 examples of people that happened to, so therefore I can't do it. So I'm gonna buckle down and lean in and drive through this.
Right. And so for me, that's something I learned that had a positive and a negative. The negative, or the part of not being vulnerable, that takes reflection and processing.
Yeah.
And I don't think I had that then, because everything was happening very quickly, because that's the nature of that business. So it took me a while to understand, oh, there's a big downside to learning quickly. Not negatively, this is going to sound negative, but when you can be facile but quick, witty, the appearance of ease. I'm very shy. I'm very introverted. I can be a hermit for a long time and be very, very happy. I really had to. My social battery would be gone. So I would spend whole weekends alone. I was sort of monk-like when I wasn't, because putting the work I did, you had to be putting out all the time, not just while you're on, in front of a camera, all the time, all the time. Finding a few people with whom I could release all of that saved me, really.
Well, I think that's great advice no matter who you are and what industry you're in, right? Sometimes the energy you expend in order to be on, quote unquote, on stage, whatever your stage is. And some people that gives them more energy. And for many people, they need that release outside of there. And they need that circle of people that they can trust, that core group of people, to be just
Crucial.
hair down, vulnerable, like, and then no judgment zone, right? And if you don't have that in your life, that's when I think people either isolate too far and don't get the help they need from a mental health standpoint, or they overcompensate the other way and they drive themselves into the on all the time, and then they eventually collapse. Like, it's that kind of like finding that middle ground, right? Where you learn how to the tension and release, and we call it in storytelling, right? But it's in life too, right? It's putting yourself in that same tension and release.
Absolutely, absolutely. Learning the words like self-care, et cetera, that are just very present in the lives of my students and the lives of, folks who are I'm Gen X too. So um, self-care, mental health care, we didn't talk about that. Nobody, not people got it, but it wasn't talked about as crucial.
Yeah.
And I do think it is. So I think this is one of the really terrific things about generations that I come into contact with as a professor. Um, they get it. They get it. And balance is needed because you still must be in the marketplace of work. So it's interesting to me to come into contact with lessons that I learned in the way that I learned them in those decades, and how students, young people now are processing the way the point of view. Point of view is something we talk about in acting, but in life, if I can't understand or don't even try to understand your point of view, where you're coming from, what it's like to stand in your shoes and look out, I have missed 50% of what's going on.
That's so good. I think the balance too is as I'm raising some Gen Zers. My oldest daughter's borderline millennial, and then we got folks in the workplace here, and I think a lot about coming from Gen X, being raised in a military family. My father's Marine, and vulnerability wasn't necessarily the prime topic, but learning the balance though between self care and selfless care, meaning that I have to take time to make sure my mind is right so that I can actually go serve others better. And if all I do is worry about myself, then I become a narcissist. And all I do is worry about myself, and I throw myself a pity party all the time. And it's me. I need self-care constantly. Well, there's issues there. But if I don't have time to then translate that into selfless care, where I'm helping serve others in some meaningful way, I'll always be out of balance. And I think I tell my kids that all the time. There's this balance between you shouldn't, if you over serve others, you're going to drain yourself and you're going to collapse and crash. But if you only worry about your own junk all the time and you need to kind of take care of yourself, you'll never feel fulfillment because you'll be stuck in this place of almost like, you know what I'm saying? Like
I know
you probably
exactly
talk
what
to
you're
your
saying.
students a lot about this too, right?
And I don't know if you've heard this. I hear this all the time from students. They don't intend to have children. I can't tell you how many times I hear that daily. This particular generation, we're talking Gen Y, I guess. My daughter's Gen Y, but not millennials. But I've taught for 20 years now. So I've been through quite a number of iterations of philosophies of where does my attention go? And in this culture, we don't talk as much. You were just talking about it, about life experience and how that translates to your soul and to your character. And it's hard to teach that to a 17, 18, 19-year-old. They don't have the life experience. And so the children thing, why I brought that up, I was lucky enough as a independent artist who did not come from means, having a family. I wanted children, but I didn't know. It wasn't one of the on my horizon. It wasn't one of my goals. And lucky enough, I had a daughter. And as you know, I'm sure as a father, um, there's a level of self-sacrifice that starts to occur simply because you have to. You don't think about it theoretically. Oh, I should do a few service projects in order to understand what it means not to think about my. You just have to get up at 4 a.m. You just need. So it's an interesting crucible on which we're, foundered. I'm not sure that's the right metaphor, but I will forever be grateful. And so when I hear, students talk about who knows what will really happen, but
Right.
I don't fight with them. I understand where they're coming from. It's a very different world than when I or you entered it as an adult. It's very, very different. So try to respect it.
Yeah, this is the interesting thing. So I have a son who's going into his sophomore year in college, and he wants to be a screenwriter. So he's going into digital media communications, and he's writing, and he's just an amazing writer. He has this vision for his future of, Steven Spielberg meets Christopher Nolan meets all this stuff, but he's also growing up in this world where technology and social media, and there's just an unlimited way to put your narrative out there than there was when we were growing up. And as you coach these students now at Texas State in the field of acting, what I love that you mentioned this, because I would love for you to comment on. I'm always telling, as an entrepreneur myself, I'm like, that's great, but what's the business model? Like, I'm always pushing him into how do you advise actors coming out that they come in 17, 18, 19 years old, you're taking them through, how do you balance the idea of here's the craft and art of acting and what that looks like, but also you're going to starve if you don't understand that there's a business associated with this, and here's how you think about it. Do you bifurcate it like that, or do you just kind of say it's all one thing?
Well, I suppose ultimately it's all one thing. I work with an amazing team. There's 5 of us who all comprise the acting faculty at Texas State University. I did serve as head of acting for 6 years, and now Kate Blushing has been our head of acting for the last 3 years, doing a brilliant job. And I work with other colleagues, so we have a trajectory of curriculum from very first semester freshman year until senior year. When I get a hold of them, I do teach some other things, but I have the seniors for a class that's a transition to the profession class. So it's crucial. Probably this comes from my practical background a bit too, but I also have the legitimacy of, I had a very successful career in Los Angeles, depending on what your definition of success, but if it's working and making a living and it's, getting cast more than once, I was successful. So part of what my job, that whole class, senior year, it's not the only class they take more, but my class, 2 semesters, financial literacy, understanding personal accountability, personal habits, deep research on where are you going next? Are you moving to Los Angeles? Are you moving to Chicago? Are you moving to New York? You have to substantiate to me every single cost associated with this move. And I mean, from renting, a trailer to what neighborhoods you've researched, how safe they are, how much your rent is going to cost. Do you have roommates? All of the extraordinarily, they have to go through an entire money management course that's online so that they understand if they have an overdraft at the bank. What does that mean? So they understand what is a good interest rate on a car. It's things that I was never given.
So, Lauren, if you had to put it all together now and say, okay, this is some of the advice you'd give any student, but particularly the students that you're coaching in there, what are some transferable advice you would give for folks? I know I love what you're doing with financial literacy and teaching actors how to be prepared for the real world. What are those top 3 pieces of advice that you'd give any young Gen Z, or let's say an 18 to 22-year-old, as they're preparing to move to that next phase of their life, that you have found are transferable from acting to anything that they might do?
Keeping it in mind their age and life experience, I would talk to you differently than I would talk to them. Our culture is very self-oriented, including all of the platforms, TikTok, YouTube, X, Instagram, very self-promoting. And it's difficult to combat that influence on our culture. It's important to understand those platforms as tools, because for an actor, they're crucial. It's what is required of an actor, anyone in the performing arts now, especially entertainment and media. So understanding how to utilize those platforms without getting brainwashed or hypnotized by the solipsistic message that is inherent in those platforms. That's important. Using these audiences, communities that are part of YouTube, et cetera, as a way to more deeply understand, these are my gifts. Oh, I do this well. I can be funny. I can be thoughtful. I can read books and people are interested. Whatever your deal is, find it and use it. It's a way to monetize. That wasn't even a word when I was a young professional, but it's important because it's like my day job waiting tables. Monetizing some gift, some skill that you have can sustain you while you search for the aspects of your career that you haven't yet achieved. That's one. Being pretty, being funny naturally in class, in life, does not equal understanding how to tell stories.
Well, there's a lot there. So I think I'll summarize that as no matter what your major is or what you're looking at, that idea that we all have a set of gifts and talents and strengths, and we're working on the craft of life, right? Using your gifts and talents and strengths to transfer that over into something. Don't lose sight of your dream. Keep the dream at the forefront, but be incremental in knowing that this is the social media today, and a lot of our culture will tell you that everybody's got a instantaneous gratification. And no, we got to build a life strategy, but stay in your lane. I think it's a good thing, but don't be restricted to the lane that you think other people have told you should be in.
Oh, that's well put. Because then you're not growing and you're not
Right.
pivoting. Is that your word? Great word. To that can be joyful. It doesn't have to be a burden. Oh, now I need to know how to. It can be. I learned a new game, or I learned a new learning, finding joy in it rather than resisting it.
And I think that's the ultimate thing I love about talking to folks like yourself is when you understand your purpose or your why, then you can start to line up a lot of different ways to accomplish that. And as actors, it can be all kinds of different channels and sources, but we all have the same
Mm-hmm.
the same
Or
inherent desire to achieve a purpose in life, and then use your gifts and talents and strengths to use it to do that, right? So, well, where can people learn more about you and what's going on at Texas State? And maybe they want to enroll there. Maybe they just want to learn more about you as an actress and a person
thank
and
you.
someone who's mentoring a lot of students today.
Texas State, our program, the acting program, we have a musical theater program. We were just named by the Hollywood Reporter one of the top 25 training schools in the country.
Wow.
And I say that because we're also the most affordable. We're a state university, so it's a conservatory program within a state university. So I highly recommend people do some research if they're interested in story and understanding. If they're interested in what I said, I have great colleagues. We're in San Marcos, Texas, which is half an hour south of Austin. That's my day job. And I'm also, as a representative of the cast of The Nanny, I attend fan conventions, and I also work on Cameo, which is a platform where fans can connect. I can make recordings for lots and lots of, sports figures, celebrities, et cetera. Are part of Cameo. It's just a way to keep in contact because The Nanny came at a certain time. It's gone generationally. So when 90s is when we were on, but I have kids coming in now who watch it with their parents, with their grandparents, whatever. It becomes a comfort show for a lot of people. So I'm blessed. I'm really blessed to have been part of something like that has a legacy. So those are 3 ways that you can get in touch with me. Yeah.
That's great. Well, thank you for being on. Thank you for your insight and your wisdom and sharing your story with us. And I'm sure it's going to spark a few things in a few of our listeners as well. So we really appreciate having you on.
Hey, you're very welcome. It was a great conversation. Thank you.